Step into the heart of ancient Rome, where power, ambition, and betrayal shape the destiny of an empire. Beware the Ides of March, the assassination of Julius Caesar. Tony Robinson's Romans invites you on a journey through one of history's most dramatic and fateful events. This story unfolds with the grandeur of Caesar's triumphs, the whispers of conspiracy, and the final, shocking betrayal that changed the course of Western civilization forever. In this immersive, you will witness the clash of ideals, republic versus tyranny, told through the eyes of the men and women who lived it. Each chapter paints vivid scenes of Rome's streets, the tense halls of the Senate, and the personal struggles of characters like Brutus, Cassius, Mark Antony, and Caesar himself. Perfect for history lovers and fans of powerful storytelling. This tale combines historical accuracy with a captivating voiceover style, allowing you to not just hear history, but feel it. Close your eyes and let the echoes of Roman voices, the clash of swords, and the murmur of the crowd transport you back in time. Listen closely, for the Ides of March are near. Welcome to our journey into one of history's greatest turning points, the assassination of Julius Caesar. Before we dive into the story, imagine the bustling streets of Rome, the scent of incense, the hum of markets, and the ever-present tension of politics and power. Caesar stands at the height of his glory, yet shadows of betrayal creep closer. In these chapters, we will explore not only the events that led to that fateful day, but also the hearts and minds of those who made history. Prepare yourself. Our tale begins where loyalty and ambition collide. This morning, the air is thick with omens. Lightning split the sky in the dead of night, rattling the city's rooftops. A soothsayer claims to have seen a lioness giving birth in the forum, and strange birds, never seen before in the city, circle above the capital. Ordinary citizens speak of these signs with growing fear, wondering if the gods themselves are warning of a great upheaval. Now, Caesar stands on the balcony of his villa, on the Palatine Hill, looking out over the city that has both adored and feared him. His face, weathered by campaigns and sleepless nights, betrays little emotion. Around him, his loyal aides prepare for the coming session of the Senate. The Republic needs direction, Caesar murmurs to himself, and I will give it to them. To his supporters, these words mark him as a hero. To his enemies, they mark him as a tyrant. Elsewhere, in the shadowed corners of the city, conspiracies are being born. Cassius, lean and sharp-eyed, gathers a small group of senators in a quiet courtyard. If Caesar is crowned, he whispers, Rome's freedom dies. Will you stand idle while a single man wears the crown that belongs to no one? His voice is low but urgent, igniting the embers of resentment that have long burned in their hearts. The chapter closes on the image of Rome itself, its marble columns gleaming under the first drops of rain, its people hurrying beneath the arches. The narrator's voice echoes like a warning. The storm has begun, and before it passes, the fate of Rome will be written in blood. The streets of Rome are alive with celebration. Caesar's latest triumph has brought unprecedented wealth and glory to the city. Golden chariots roll through the forum, bearing treasures from distant lands, gold from Gaul, rare spices from the east, and prisoners of war in chains. Trumpets blare, and petals rain down from balconies as Caesar rides at the head of his legionaries, a laurel crown glinting under the pale Roman sun. Yet, amidst this jubilation, not everyone cheers. Behind the smiles of certain senators lurk wary eyes, watching the man who stands above all others. Antony, Caesar's loyal ally, rides close by his side, his armor polished to a mirror's shine, waving to the crowd. He sees the senators watching and smirks, knowing that their envy only feeds Caesar's legend. Meanwhile, Cassius stands on the steps of the Senate, his expression tight, his mind calculating. How long before this man claims the title of king? He mutters to Brutus, who watches silently, torn between admiration for Caesar and loyalty to the Republic. In the crowd, the citizens adore Caesar. Women throw flowers at his feet, while children climb statues to catch a glimpse of the general who brought peace. But under the joyous music, a darker note hums, whispers that the Republic is dying. That night, Caesar hosts a banquet in his honor. The dining hall glows with oil lamps, their flickering flames dancing across the marble columns. Senators and generals recline on couches as servants pour fine wine and set out lavish platters of roasted meats and exotic fruits. Caesar laughs and toasts his friends, but even in celebration, his presence commands the room. He speaks of reforms, of land for veterans, of new conquests yet to come. The word king lingers unspoken but heavy in the air. In a quiet corner of the hall, Brutus sits apart, his brow furrowed. Antony notices and approaches him with a grin. "You look troubled, friend. Has Caesar not done enough for Rome?" Brutus forces a smile but remains silent. For in his heart, admiration for Caesar battles with fear for the Republic's future. The scene closes with a reflection of Caesar standing before a mirror, removing his laurel crown, staring at his own reflection, as if he sees both conqueror and condemned man. As dawn breaks over Rome, the Senate prepares for another session. Within its walls, the senators shuffle papers and speak in hushed tones. Their faces are lined with worry, for Caesar's recent declarations have unsettled many. Rumors swirl that the Senate may offer him the crown of Rome. Cassius moves like a shadow among them, whispering venom into eager ears. Are we men, or are we slaves to one man's ambition? He challenges, his voice soft yet filled with fire. Each word plants a seed of rebellion, drawing hesitant nods from those who fear Caesar's rise. He is not a king, Cassius presses, but he plays the part of one. Meanwhile, Brutus walks through the forum, his mind weighed down by conflict. Caesar has been a friend, a mentor, even a father figure to him. But Brutus is a true son of the Republic, raised on the ideals of liberty and shared power. As he passes by the statues of Rome's great founders, he feels their silent judgment. What is loyalty to one man, he wonders, compared to loyalty to Rome? At Caesar's villa, preparations for the coming Lupercalia festival are underway. Servants decorate the halls with greenery, and priests make sacrifices to the gods. Antony arrives with news that stirs Caesar's pride. "The people clamor for you to be king," he says with a grin. Caesar chuckles, waving off the title, but deep inside, the idea does not displease him. The scene shifts to a secret meeting in a dimly lit atrium. Cassius, joined by Casca and other conspirators, lays out his plan. We must act before the crown is placed on his head. We strike when his guard is down. Casca, rough and blunt, nods grimly. "The Ides of March," Cassius whispers. "That will be the day Rome is freed." The chapter closes on Brutus, standing alone on a hill overlooking Rome. The wind rustles his toga, carrying with it the distant echoes of cheers for Caesar. His expression is torn, caught between friendship and duty. In the distance, thunder rumbles again, a sign of the storm to come. The streets of Rome come alive with the energy of the Lupercalia festival, a celebration of fertility and ancient rites. Masked revelers run through the city, dressed in wolf skins and carrying whips to bless women for fertility. Caesar, dressed in ceremonial robes, presides over the festivities from a raised platform. His presence dominates the scene. He is both celebrated as Rome's hero and eyed warily as a man who might reach too high. Hero. Mark Antony, stripped down to a simple loincloth for the ritual race, runs through the crowd, his body painted with symbols of the festival. He is the embodiment of strength and youth, the perfect lieutenant to Caesar's power. The people cheer wildly, their voices merging into a singular chant of Caesar. Caesar! Midway through the festival, a dramatic moment arrives. Antony, following custom, approaches Caesar and attempts to crown him with a golden diadem. The crowd gasps, holding its collective breath. Caesar, in a show of humility, refuses the crown, waving it away with a flourish. The people cheer again, louder than before, mistaking his refusal as evidence of his modesty. But for the senators watching from the fringes, the act speaks volumes. He plays the part of a king even as he denies it. Cassius mutters under his breath, his eyes narrowing. Cicero, ever the orator, later remarks that Caesar's refusal was nothing more than a performance. He refused the crown 3 times, but each time with less conviction. What does that tell you? As the festival winds down, Caesar retreats to his villa, his mind churning. Antony, still flushed from the race, joins him for a quiet conversation. The people are ready, Antony says softly. They would name you king if you allowed it. Caesar's expression is unreadable, but a faint smile lingers on his lips. In the shadows of the city, Cassius meets again with Brutus. Do you see now? Cassius asks. Today was not about humility. It was about testing the waters of kingship. Brutus says nothing, but the seeds of doubt have taken deeper root in his heart. The cours, the following day, Rome is abuzz with talk of the crown and Caesar's refusal. At the forum, gossip spreads like wildfire, some praising Caesar's humility, while others question his true motives. Sufor. Kai Stru Fopper. Cassius walks among the crowds, listening, planting quiet remarks that feed suspicion. Would a man so modest allow his image to be worshipped like a god? He whispers to passers-by. His words sink into the public mind like drops of poison. Brutus is restless. In his villa, he paces the marble floors, torn between 2 loyalties. His wife, Portia, watches him with concern. You look troubled, my husband, she says softly. What weighs on your heart? Brutus cannot bring himself to speak of conspiracy, but she knows. She pleads with him to trust her, but Brutus remains silent, his brow furrowed. Meanwhile, Caesar continues to assert his influence, dismissing Senate traditions and appointing allies to powerful positions. The Republic's old guard feels increasingly powerless. Cicero, though not part of the conspiracy, warns publicly of the dangers of unchecked ambition. A republic cannot survive when one man's will becomes law, he declares in the Senate, his voice echoing. At night, Cassius meets Casca and other conspirators in a dimly lit alley. The atmosphere is tense, every creak of wood or rustle of cloth setting their nerves on edge. Cassius speaks with passion. Rome is not free, he says. We must act or the Republic is lost. Casca grunts in agreement, recounting how Caesar's supporters practically begged him to take the crown. It will not be long before he accepts, Casca warns. The chapter closes with a symbolic scene. Brutus standing in his garden, gazing at the stars. A cold wind sweeps through the leaves, and he whispers to himself, Is Caesar's blood the price of Rome's freedom? His silence is the first step toward a deadly choice. The pressure on Brutus grows with each passing day. Rome reveres him as a noble man, a descendant of the founder of the Republic. Cassius knows this and uses it to his advantage, showering Brutus with appeals to his sense of duty. "You are Rome's last hope," Cassius insists during their clandestine meetings. "Without you, the conspiracy will fail. Caesar trusts you. He will never suspect." Brutus's nights are plagued by dreams. He sees Caesar crowned king, the Senate dissolved, and Rome's liberty extinguished. In another vision, he sees blood flowing down the steps of the Capitol. He wakes in a cold sweat, Portia by his side. "Tell me what torments you," she begs. Brutus, moved by her devotion, nearly confides in her but holds back. One morning, as Brutus walks through the forum, he encounters Caesar himself. Caesar greets him warmly, clasping his hand. "Brutus, my friend," Caesar says, "you and I will guide Rome into greatness." Brutus forces a smile, but his heart is heavy. He knows that the man before him is both a father figure and, perhaps, the Republic's greatest threat. Cassius sends anonymous letters to Brutus, written as if from the Roman people, pleading for him to stand against Caesar. "Speak, strike, redress," one letter reads. Brutus reads them by candlelight, his face shadowed by doubt and resolve. The conspirators meet once more, this time in the home of Marcus Brutus. The group debates how to strike and whether Antony should also be killed. Cassius argues that Antony is dangerous, but Brutus refuses. "We are sacrificers, not butchers," he says firmly. "Our purpose is to save the Republic, not to slaughter Caesar's allies." His words carry a weight of honor that sways the others. But Cassius remains wary. The chapter ends with Brutus alone in his study, staring at a dagger laid on the table. His voice whispers into the silence, "Caesar must fall. But is it I who must strike?" Portia, the wife of Brutus, senses the storm gathering within her husband. She watches him from across the atrium of their villa, his face pale, his movements restless. Late at night, she finds him pacing under the moonlight, whispering to himself. At dawn, she confronts him. "Brutus, you have been distant," she says, her voice steady but filled with worry. "You rise before the sun, you eat nothing. You stare into the shadows as if you see ghosts. Do you not trust me?" Brutus tries to reassure her, but she knows his mind is burdened. To prove her loyalty, Portia does something drastic. She wounds her thigh with a small blade, bearing the pain silently. "If I can endure this pain, I can endure the truth," she tells him, her eyes fierce. Brutus, moved by her courage, promises to confide in her when the time is right. Meanwhile, the conspiracy strengthens. Cassius, Casca, Decimus, and others gather again, their faces grim under the flickering light of oil lamps. They finalize the plan. The Ides of March, Julius, will be their day of action. Brutus's participation reassures the conspirators that their deed will not be seen as a crime of envy, but as a sacrifice for Rome's freedom. Caesar, unaware of the knives being sharpened in secret, continues with his affairs. He plans to address the Senate on the Ides. Antony remains close, ever the loyal friend, oblivious to the threat. The chapter closes with Portia watching Brutus from their balcony as he stares at the stars, his face resolute yet haunted. The narrator's voice whispers, "Even the strongest hearts falter when torn between love and duty." The days before the Ides of March are heavy with omens. Rome trembles under strange signs. A slave is said to have given birth to a creature with the head of a lion. A comet streaks across the night sky, its fiery tail leaving whispers of doom. Priests, uneasy with their sacrifices, warn of the gods' displeasure. Caesar, ever the man of reason, laughs off these warnings. "Cowards die many times before their deaths," he declares. "The valiant taste of death but once." Yet even he cannot fully ignore the unease creeping through the city. His wife, Calpurnia, has dreams of blood flowing from Caesar's statue, with Romans washing their hands in it. She begs him to stay home on the Ides. At the same time, a soothsayer, an old man with clouded eyes, intercepts Caesar's procession one morning. Grabbing his cloak, the man whispers, "Beware the Ides of March." Caesar pauses, amused by the trembling prophet, and dismisses him with a wave of his hand. Meanwhile, Cassius grows bolder. He speaks openly with the other conspirators, reminding them of the sacred duty they bear. Brutus, though resolved, remains solemn and silent. His heart is heavy with the knowledge of what is to come. As night falls, the city seems eerily quiet. Dogs howl in the distance, and the Tiber flows dark under the moon. The conspirators gather for the final time before the act, their faces etched with determination. The night before the Ides of March is filled with tension. Caesar sleeps uneasily, haunted by Calpurnia's visions. She sees his statue bleeding from countless wounds, while smiling senators dip their hands in the crimson flow. She wakes, trembling, urging him to remain at home. "Do not go to the Senate tomorrow," she pleads. "I fear for your life." Caesar tries to dismiss her fears, but her tears weaken his resolve. "Perhaps I will stay," he concedes reluctantly. Yet, as dawn approaches, Decimus Brutus arrives at Caesar's home. With charm and cunning, Decimus convinces Caesar to ignore the omens. "The Senate intends to offer you the crown," he lies smoothly. "If you do not attend, they will see it as weakness." Caesar, swayed by ambition and pride, changes his mind. Meanwhile, Brutus spends the night in silent turmoil. Portia senses his anguish, but he does not speak. She prays to the household gods, knowing that fate is beyond her reach. Across the city, Cassius and Casca sharpen their blades, whispering final prayers to Mars and the spirits of war. The city feels unusually sleepy. The conspirators know that by this time tomorrow, either Caesar will be dead, or they themselves will be hunted like traitors. The morning of the Ides of March dawns clear and bright, as if mocking the darkness that is to come. Caesar dresses carefully, his crimson-bordered toga draped perfectly over his shoulders. He pauses briefly before a mirror, adjusting the laurel wreath on his brow. Calpurnia begs him one last time to stay, but he smiles reassuringly. "What is to come will come," he says. Outside, the streets are alive with citizens eager to catch sight of their beloved leader. Mark Antony arrives to escort Caesar to the Senate, his presence radiating strength. The conspirators watch from the shadows as Caesar passes, their hearts pounding. Along the way, the soothsayer appears once more. "The Ides of March are come," Caesar says with a smirk. "Aye," replies the old man, "but not yet gone." The words linger ominously in the air. The Senate chamber is a theater of shadows and schemes. Marble pillars gleam in the morning sun, but the mood inside is tense. Caesar enters with his usual confidence, greeted by senators bowing and smiling, a facade hiding the steel of betrayal beneath their robes. Brutus watches him closely, his heart pounding. Caesar greets Brutus warmly, unaware of the silent storm building around him. "Friends, Rome is on the brink of greatness," Caesar declares as he takes his seat. His voice carries power, resonating through the chamber. The senators, however, exchange furtive glances. Cassius shifts uncomfortably, his hand brushing the hidden dagger under his toga. One by one, the conspirators position themselves around Caesar. Casca takes his place near Caesar's side, ready to strike when the signal is given. Trebonius distracts Mark Antony outside, leading him away under the pretext of a private conversation. Antony, suspicious of nothing, follows willingly. Brutus stands behind Caesar, his face pale but resolute. His mind churns with memories, Caesar's generosity, his trust, his friendship. Yet Brutus's loyalty to the Republic burns brighter. For Rome, he whispers under his breath, gripping the hilt of his concealed blade. As the conspirators form a circle, Decimus Brutus steps forward, presenting a petition for Caesar to pardon an exiled ally. Caesar waves him off with a dismissive hand. "These decisions are final," he says. Decimus glances at Cassius. Now is the moment. The chapter ends with the air charged with silent anticipation. The narrator's voice resonates like a drumbeat. The dagger is drawn, though its blade has yet to taste history. Casca moves first. With trembling hands, he steps closer to Caesar, as though to present another petition. In a sudden motion, he draws his dagger and strikes, the blade piercing Caesar's shoulder. Caesar recoils, stunned, his eyes wide with shock and betrayal. "Casca, what is this?" he cries, but his words are drowned out by the sound of steel scraping from beneath togas. Cassius follows, slashing at Caesar's side, his face contorted with rage and fear. Then Decimus, Casca's brother, and others close in, stabbing in rapid succession. The Senate chamber erupts in chaos. Chairs overturn, scrolls scatter, and the marble floor grows slick with blood. Caesar fights back, grabbing Casca's arm, but the sheer number of attackers overwhelms him. Through the frenzy, Brutus hesitates. His dagger remains sheathed as Caesar locks eyes with him. "You too, Brutus?" Caesar gasps. The words are not just a question, but a deep wound, cutting deeper than any blade. Brutus, tears welling, nods slightly and plunges his dagger into Caesar's chest. It is both an act of murder and of tragic loyalty to a dying republic. The final blow leaves Caesar collapsing at the base of Pompey's statue, his blood staining the marble. The room falls silent except for the heavy breathing of the conspirators, their togas soaked in crimson. Brutus steps back, his hand trembling. Time seems to stand still. Caesar slumps against Pompey's statue, his once commanding voice now reduced to a whisper. "Es-tu brute?" he utters, his gaze fixed on Brutus. The words strike Brutus like a thunderbolt, the full weight of his betrayal crashing down upon him. The Senate chamber is silent except for the sound of Caesar's labored breaths. Brutus kneels beside Caesar, his face etched with sorrow. "This is for Rome," he whispers, but Caesar's eyes are already glazing over, his strength failing. His laurel crown falls from his head, rolling across the marble floor like a symbol of Rome's shattered order. The conspirators stand around Caesar's body, their faces pale and hands trembling. None of them speak. Even Cassius, who has driven the conspiracy from the start, looks momentarily shaken. "It is done," Casca finally mutters, his voice hoarse. Outside, Mark Antony, still detained by Trebonius, hears the commotion. He senses something is wrong and rushes toward the chamber, but by the time he arrives, Caesar lies dead. Antony freezes at the door, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. He kneels beside Caesar, his voice breaking. "O mighty Caesar, dost thou lie so low?" The chapter ends with Brutus urging the conspirators to remain calm. "Let us proclaim our deed to the people," he says. "We are not murderers, but liberators of Rome." Yet deep inside, doubt gnaws at his soul. Mark Antony stands over Caesar's body, his grief quickly turning to fury. "You have unleashed chaos," he hisses at the conspirators, his voice trembling with rage. Cassius steps forward, his dagger still bloody, and warns Antony not to test them. Brutus intervenes, holding out his hand. "Antony, we acted not for hate, but for Rome's freedom," he says. Antony stares at the hand, torn between vengeance and survival. In a moment of political calculation, Antony chooses restraint. He pretends to accept their reasoning, masking his desire for revenge. "If you claim to act for Rome, let me speak to the people," Antony says. Brutus agrees, believing Antony's loyalty to Caesar will not extend to rebellion. Cassius, however, remains suspicious. "You trust him too much," Cassius whispers. But Brutus is resolute. Antony requests to take Caesar's body and arrange the funeral rites. Brutus, in an attempt to appear honorable, grants permission. "Speak well of us," Brutus urges. Antony nods, but in his heart he vows to avenge Caesar's death. When the conspirators leave, Antony kneels by Caesar's corpse, tears streaming down his face. "Pardon me, thou bleeding piece of earth," he murmurs, "that I am meek and gentle with these butchers." His voice hardens. Cry havoc, and let slip the dogs of war. The chapter ends with Antony plotting his famous oration, the words that will turn the Roman people against the conspirators. The forum is filled with thousands of Romans, all eager to hear the explanation for Caesar's shocking death. Brutus stands on the steps of the Capitol, his white toga now stained with Caesar's blood, yet he radiates calm authority. He raises his hand, and the murmurs of the crowd fall silent. "Romans, countrymen, and lovers of liberty," Brutus begins, his voice steady. He speaks not of hatred but of necessity, explaining that Caesar's ambition threatened the Republic. "Not that I loved Caesar less," he says, "but that I loved Rome more." His words carry weight, for Brutus is known for his honesty and noble character. The crowd listens, torn between sorrow and understanding. Cassius watches from the sidelines, nodding approvingly as the crowd begins to cheer for Brutus's selfless sacrifice. For a moment, it seems the conspirators' message has prevailed. Then Antony arrives with Caesar's body, carried on a bier. He looks at Brutus and bows, asking for permission to speak. Brutus agrees, addressing the crowd once more. "Listen to Antony, for he is noble, and will speak only what is just." Brutus then departs with Cassius, leaving Antony alone with the people. Antony's face is a mask of controlled fury as he prepares to turn the crowd's heart. The stage is set for his legendary oration. The forum grows quiet as Mark Antony steps forward, Caesar's lifeless body laid on a bier beside him. His face is shadowed by grief, but his voice is calm and measured. "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears," he begins, each word deliberate, pulling the crowd into his confidence. He speaks of Caesar's accomplishments, his conquests, his generosity, his refusal of the crown during the Lupercalia festival. Antony does not accuse the conspirators outright, but each phrase carries a subtle undertone of doubt. The noble Brutus says Caesar was ambitious, Antony declares, pausing, and Brutus is an honorable man. His repetition of honorable grows heavier, turning the word into a weapon of irony. As Antony speaks, the crowd begins to murmur, their certainty wavering. Antony draws them further by unveiling Caesar's will. "You loved him once," he says, "and in his will, he leaves each Roman citizen 75 drachmas and his private gardens for the public." The people gasp, their grief mixing with anger. Then Antony reveals the cloak Caesar wore during his assassination, pointing out each stab wound, naming the conspirators responsible. Finally, he lifts Caesar's mantle and shows the body, the multiple wounds like silent accusations. "You all did love him once, not without cause," Antony cries, his voice breaking. "O judgment, thou art fled to brutish beasts." The crowd erupts in anger. Antony's words have turned them, and they demand revenge. "Fire! Kill! Burn! Slay!" Voices shout from the crowd as they rush to the streets, ready to destroy the homes of the conspirators. Antony watches them go. His vengeance taking root in their rage, Rome descends into chaos. Inspired by Antony's words, the crowd surges through the streets like a raging tide. They set fire to benches, tear down banners, and smash open the doors of senators' homes. Shouts of "Avenge Caesar!" echo from every alley. The conspirators, scattered across the city, begin to fear for their lives. Brutus, who believed Rome would understand his intentions, now hears the roar of an enraged mob outside his villa. "They see us not as liberators, but as traitors," Cassius says bitterly, as he peers from the shadows. In the forum, Antony watches the chaos unfold with cold satisfaction. "Now let it work," he mutters. "Mischief thou art afoot, take thou what course thou wilt." He knows this riot is only the beginning of a war for control of Rome. One mob attacks the house of a poet named Cinna, mistaking him for Cinna the conspirator. "I am not that Cinna," the poet cries. But the frenzied crowd, blinded by rage, tears him apart. Antony hears of this and realizes the people's fury can no longer be contained. Meanwhile, Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, quietly returns to Rome. He meets Antony in secret, and the two begin to discuss vengeance and the future of Caesar's legacy. Antony sees potential in Octavian, though the young man's calm ambition unsettles him. As night falls, the conspirators realize that Rome is no longer safe. Brutus, Cassius, and the remaining senators gather in Brutus's villa, their faces pale and drawn. Outside, the mob chants for blood, and torches flicker like angry stars in the darkness. "We must leave Rome," Cassius urges, his voice tight with frustration. "The people are lost to us. Antony has turned them." Brutus is silent for a long moment before nodding. "We did this for Rome, yet Rome calls us traitors," he says, his tone heavy with regret. Portia watches her husband pack his belongings, her face pale but calm. "Will you return?" she asks. Brutus can only offer a faint, uncertain smile. "If fate allows." The conspirators slip out of the city under the cover of night, their togas replaced with rough cloaks to avoid recognition. They head toward the countryside, planning to rally legions loyal to the old republic. Back in Rome, Antony begins consolidating his power. With Caesar's will in hand, he secures the loyalty of the people and the army. Octavian, though young, quickly gains support as Caesar's rightful heir. Antony and Octavian form an uneasy alliance, each aware of the other's ambitions. And the chapter ends with Brutus and Cassius looking back at the city from a distant hill, the fires of the mob glowing like embers of war, Visager states. In the days following Caesar's funeral, Antony and Octavian meet in secret to discuss the future. Antony, the seasoned general, sees in Octavian a cunning mind hidden behind a youthful appearance. "You are Caesar's blood," Antony says. "The people will follow you." Octavian, however, is no mere pawn. "I will claim my inheritance," he states firmly, "but Rome must be mine as much as it is yours." Antony bristles at the challenge, but sees the value in alliance. Together, they begin plotting to eliminate the conspirators and restore Caesar's honor. Meanwhile, Lepidus, another loyalist, joins their cause, forming what will soon become the Second Triumvirate. The three men divide power between them, their unity forged not by trust, but by shared ambition. News of their alliance reaches Brutus and Cassius, now in the provinces. They move swiftly. Cassius warns, "We must raise our own armies before they strike." Brutus, reluctant but resolute, agrees to call upon the legions that once served Caesar, but now seek leadership. Back in Rome, Portia hears the news of escalating war. Her husband is far away, preparing for battle, and she is left surrounded by whispers of treachery. The city, now under Antony and Octavian's control, is hostile to anyone associated with Brutus. Portia writes letters to Brutus, pouring her heart onto the parchment. Unable to bear the strain, Portia's mind begins to fray. She recalls the wound she gave herself as proof of loyalty, now a painful scar. In her villa's courtyard, she stares at the coals of a brazier, her thoughts dark. History tells us that Portia, overwhelmed by grief and isolation, ends her life by swallowing hot coals. A desperate, tragic act of love and despair. The chapter closes with Brutus, far from Rome, receiving news of Portia's death. He stands silent, his heart heavy, but he buries his pain deep inside. "I have no time for tears," he says to Cassius. "War is upon us. Rome folds under the shadow of a new alliance. Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus formally established the Second Triumvirate. Their pact is one of necessity, not friendship. The three men meet outside Rome, on a riverbank where their armies wait. Antony, the seasoned warrior, is wary of Octavian's cunning youth, while Lepidus serves as a bridge between them, his ambition tempered by age. 2. The Triumvirate's first act is ruthless. They divide Rome's provinces among themselves and draft a list of proscriptions, names of those who must die for the sake of stability. Senators, generals, and anyone who opposes them are marked for death. Even Cicero, once Rome's greatest orator, finds his name written on the list, much to Octavian's quiet satisfaction. The city grows tense as soldiers carry out the executions. Heads of proscribed men are displayed in the forum, a grim warning to all who resist. Citizens whisper of the Republic's final death, replaced now by the rule of three powerful men. Antony, however, remains focused on Brutus and Cassius. "They are the last threat to Caesar's memory," he tells Octavian. "We must crush them before they gather strength." Octavian agrees, though his ambition quietly stretches beyond mere vengeance. He sees himself as Rome's future ruler. Cicero, who had spoken boldly against Antony after Caesar's death, becomes a prime target of the triumvirate's vengeance. Despite Brutus's and Cassius's admiration for him, Cicero is left vulnerable when the conspirators flee Rome. In his villa near Formia, Cicero learns his name is on the proscription list. His loyal servants beg him to escape, but Cicero, weary of political life, seems resigned. "I have lived long enough," he says softly. "Let Rome remember me for my words, not my flight." When Antony's soldiers arrive, Cicero steps out to meet them. He does not beg or resist. Instead, he bares his throat and commands, "Do what you must." The soldiers, reluctant but bound by orders, behead the great orator. His head and hands are displayed on the rostra in the forum, an act that horrifies the Roman people. Antony watches the display without remorse. "This is the price of opposition," he declares. Octavian, however, feels a quiet unease. Cicero's death marks not just the silencing of a critic, but the final extinguishing of the old republic's voice. Far from Rome, Brutus and Cassius rally legions in the east. They find support among those who still cling to the ideals of the republic. In cities like Sardis and Smyrna, they raise funds, gather soldiers, and forge alliances with local rulers. Brutus emerges as a reluctant general. Though he was once a man of letters and philosophy, he now commands thousands. His men admire him for his fairness and restraint, qualities that stand in stark contrast to Antony's brutal efficiency. Cassius, however, is the sharper strategist. Together, they amass a force capable of challenging the triumvirate. Tensions between Brutus and Cassius occasionally flare. "We cannot afford hesitation," Cassius warns. "Antony is ruthless. We must strike first." Brutus, always measured, prefers diplomacy over aggression. Yet both know that war is inevitable. Letters from Rome inform them of Cicero's death and Antony's growing power. Brutus's heart grows heavy, but he steels himself. If Rome is to be free, we must face Antony and Octavian on the battlefield, he declares. Antony and Octavian march east with their combined armies, determined to confront Brutus and Cassius. The road to Philippi is long and arduous, with both sides maneuvering for advantage. Scouts report frequent skirmishes as small bands of soldiers clash in the countryside. The city of Philippi in Macedonia becomes the focal point of the coming war. Brutus and Cassius fortify their positions on the high ground, setting up camps with defensive walls and watchtowers. If they come to us, they will bleed before they reach our gates, Cassius says confidently. Antony, however, is relentless. He urges Octavian to engage in direct battle, but Octavian is cautious. The young heir prefers to starve the conspirators out, cutting off their supplies. Patience wins wars, Octavian remarks coolly. Antony bristles at the thought of waiting. Trucin. At night, the camps of both armies glow with the fires of thousands of soldiers. Brutus walks among his men, speaking words of encouragement. He knows that their cause is just, but he cannot shake the feeling of looming tragedy. 1:4. The first clash at Philippi begins with the blare of trumpets and the pounding of drums. Antony leads his forces with ferocity, charging toward Cassius's lines. Shields clash, swords ring out, and the air fills with the screams of men and the scent of blood. Cassius fights like a man possessed, cutting down enemies with brutal efficiency. Yet the battle is chaotic. Dust clouds rise, obscuring friend and foe alike. In the confusion, Brutus's forces on the other side of the field manage to push Octavian's troops back, even capturing his camp. But victory on one side means disaster on the other. Cassius's forces are overwhelmed by Antony's relentless assault. Mistaking the movement of his own troops as a sign of defeat, Cassius withdraws to a nearby hill, despairing. From there, he watches the battlefield, convinced all is lost. The gods have turned against us, he laments. In a moment of tragic misunderstanding, Cassius orders his servant Pindarus to kill him, believing Brutus has fallen. With a single thrust, the loyal servant obeys, and Cassius dies gazing at the blood-red sunset over Philippi. As the dust settles after the first clash at Philippi, Brutus's men celebrate what they believe to be a victory. But on a nearby hill, Cassius lies dead by his own command, believing all is lost. His loyal servant Pindarus, trembling and grief-stricken, hides the truth of Cassius's last moments, fearing the wrath of Brutus's army. When Brutus hears of Cassius's death, his heart sinks. "I have lost half my soul," he whispers. He gazes at Cassius's body, still clad in the armor of battle, and feels the weight of both friendship and failure. Brutus tries to rally his troops, knowing the fight is not over. "We must not mourn," he declares. "We must strike again before Antony regains his strength." In Antony's camp, the mood is tense but hopeful. Antony celebrates the fall of Cassius, knowing it has dealt a heavy blow to the morale of the conspirators. Octavian, though shaken by the earlier attack, regroups his forces. Together, they plan the final strike that will crush the remnants of Brutus's army. The chapter closes with Brutus kneeling beside Cassius's body under the stars, vowing to carry the fight to the end. The night is filled with the sounds of wounded men and the distant cry of wolves, as if the gods themselves mourn the tragedy unfolding at Philippi. The morning after Cassius's death, Brutus steels himself for the inevitable. He addresses his soldiers with calm authority, his voice firm despite the grief that weighs upon him. "This is not the end of freedom, but the price of it," he says. The men cheer, inspired by his courage, But Brutus senses the odds are against them. As the second battle begins, the field at Philippi is once again filled with the roar of trumpets and the clash of steel. Antony's forces strike hard, their ranks disciplined and relentless. Octavian commands his troops with cold precision, determined to claim victory not just for Caesar, but for his own rising star. Brutus fights bravely, his sword cutting down enemy after enemy. But the tide of battle turns against him. His legions begin to falter. The weight of Antony's and Octavian's combined might too much to bear. Seeing defeat is certain, Brutus gathers his closest companions and retreats to a quiet grove nearby. There, Brutus speaks with each man, thanking them for their loyalty. "Rome will remember you," he says, his voice steady despite the doom that awaits. To his friend Strato, he offers his sword. "Hold it firm," Brutus commands, and with one final breath, he throws himself upon the blade. His last words are a whisper, "Caesar, now be still. I did not kill you with half so good a will." When Antony learns of Brutus's death, he pauses on the battlefield, his face reflecting both sorrow and respect. Unlike the hatred he held for Cassius, Antony sees Brutus as a man of principle rather than ambition. "This was the noblest Roman of them all," Antony declares to his officers. "All the conspirators acted out of envy of Caesar, but Brutus alone acted for the good of Rome." Octavian, though less sentimental, recognizes the value of Antony's words. Together, they order Brutus's body to be buried with honor. His surviving soldiers are spared, many taken into Antony's service. In Rome, word of Brutus's death spreads quickly. For some, it marks the end of hope for the Republic. For others, it signals the start of a new era under the rising star of Octavian. Antony, though victorious, reflects on the bloodshed. Standing over Brutus's grave, he murmurs, "You chose a cause too pure for this world." Years after the Ides of March, Rome is forever changed. Caesar's assassination, meant to save the Republic, has instead marked its end. Octavian, now rising as the first true emperor, will take the title Augustus and reshape Rome into an empire. The memory of Caesar remains vivid. His statues stand in every corner of the city, his name invoked as a god among men. Brutus and Cassius are remembered with both respect and condemnation, heroes to some, traitors to others. Antony's fiery path will soon lead to his own downfall. But in this moment, he is still celebrated as one of Caesar's fiercest avengers. Rome, however, now belongs to Octavian's vision. The Republic's ideals, debate, shared power, civic duty, have been replaced with the authority of a single ruler. The story closes with the narrator's voice. The Ides of March were not the end of Caesar, but the birth of an empire. In his death, Rome found not freedom, but a crown